Charles, we're here to see some ghosts.
Let's talk about the whole, being dead thing. Something happened. You didn't expect it. It was just your time. An unfortunate tragedy or a noble sacrifice. Lately I've been reading The Art of Dying, which is a collection of essays that talks about depictions of death, resurrection, dying, and so on, and everything from video games and movies to shows, as well as how we process death through funerary rites and embalming rituals. But one thing I kept wondering about while reading this was, what about ghosts? Specters, spirits, wraiths, poltergeists, even the banshee are not only powerful beings from a narrative perspective, they are also one of the most malleable representations of death in all of fiction. Typically, when you think of a ghost, you think of what? A being in a white sheet with eye holes cut in. This depiction comes from medieval burial traditions in Europe, called winding sheets, a body would be placed inside of a white sheet or cloth that was bound at the head and feet. Coffins were rare or expensive, and so many common folk were buried this way. There are also depictions like this 1813 lithograph by Robert Seymour that shows cholera as a spectral figure in a white robe emanating a black cloud. Now, all of this is pretty serious tone given the artwork. I don't want to get us bogged down in the dreary of it all. Maybe I'm still learning how to master tearing convention apart. In any case, ghosts in popular media are sometimes funny, sometimes terrifying, sometimes absolutely awe-inspiring, and sometimes they're all of those things.
I'm the ghost with the most, babe.
So what's up with this version of Beetlejuice? Or is it Beetlejuice? Beetlejuice? Beetlejuice.
It's showtime!
In the 1970s and 80s, ghost lore shifted into the postmodern era. Instead of being about ancestor worship or a solemn messenger, ghosts could be friendly like Casper or absolutely terrifying like Freddy Krueger. Beetlejuice, across his many iterations, sits between these two ideas. The original Beetlejuice was created in 1988 for the film. The concept behind the story was a malevolent spirit named Beetlejuice that was sealed away because he had a bad habit of causing a load of trouble for the land of living as well as the land of the dead. The magic of his containment required a summoner to say his name 3 times in order to break the curse. Ironically, Beetlejuice's name was a surprisingly hot topic of debate even during the film's inception. Warner Brothers hated the name Beetlejuice and wanted to call the movie House Ghosts, but the film director Tim Burton was absolutely adamant at keeping the name. Initially, it was spelled Betelgeuse, the star in the Orion constellation, which has consequently been associated with power, death, and resurrection across a multitude of cultures from Arabic, Greek, Polynesian, Egyptian, Chinese, and more. The name spelled Betelgeuse was done as a phonetically accurate pun due to people largely not knowing how to pronounce Beetlejuice at a glance. Beetlejuice, as a spirit, represents the trickster. He's not just malevolent, he's also mischievous. He jokes, he pranks, he breaks the fourth wall, especially in many of the Broadway productions. In the animated series, Beetlejuice isn't really a malevolent spirit, he's a prankster. He's Lydia's friend, and in some cases, even her hero.
And such a bold departure from the original source material!
Are you gonna keep doing that? It's incredibly rude.
Yeah? Well, that was a soliloquy. So you're the one who's being rude.
Ugh, fuck this. I am not dealing with this. Ye me glun mi gulna efa. Aha gel mehenag. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
You're working with a professional here!
Now, where were we? Right. This is officially the craziest crossover I have ever done. Like, why the hell does Beetle Guy have wings and a halo? Is he a ghost or an angel ghost? Well, actually, it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference to the fact that the Broadway productions for Beetlejuice, the role is played by Alex Brightman. He's also the voice actor for several characters across the Helliverse. In Hell of a Boss, he's Fizzaroli, the cybernetic jester imp, and in Hazbin Hotel, he's not only the voice of Serpentius, he's also the voice of Adam, the First Man. Yeah, that's right. This is a Beetlejuice has-been crossover, because why the hell not? It's an interesting concept, and I needed an excuse to study coloring wings. I hate coloring wings. It's all the individual feathers. If I could figure out an easy way to simplify multiple feathers, I would, but I need to do so without making the wings look flat. Frankly, I'm pretty happy with these wings. Actually, they look a lot better than the regular wings Adam gets. Future Agony, after Friday this last week playing Persona 5, I found a really good way to represent wings that I think I'm going to try using from now on. Toward the end of the game, there are these angel personas that you have to fight, and the way that they shade the wings was really inspiring to me. I have really enjoyed playing the Persona 5 series, especially with Yusuke, because I feel like I relate to him on an artistic level. But anyway, back to this. Another point of relevance is that in Has-Been Season 1, Adam dies, again, and technically becomes kind of like a ghost in Season 2. Though Has-Been takes an oddly more scientific stance on ghosts, where Adam isn't a literal spirit, he's a manifestation of Lute's grief, a sort of psychic apparition that only she witnesses. Her mind is used to seeing him there, and so in order to fill in the gaps and help her cope with the loss, it created a version of Adam called a bereavement hallucination. This is one reason science explains the phenomenon of people who claim to see ghosts that resemble their lost loved ones. In Helluva Boss, ghosts are explained as being infestor demons that latch onto humans and drain their life force. Imagine if one of these infestors latched onto Lute while she was in hell and has manifested a version of Adam in order to continue feeding on her. Nah, Vivzy would never be that creative. It's also clear that Adam is a hallucination and not a ghost with his own autonomy, because his memory is limited only to what Lute knew about Adam, including his own thoughts and feelings. In all seriousness, Adam got turned to Swiss cheese by a chaos gremlin, but his misogyny and revolting behavior lives on in Lute's mind and actually makes him a pretty perfect parallel to our poltergeist now if I ponder this. Purportedly, the appearance of a ghost has been widespread across many cultures as being one of a spiritual replica of a living person. Facial features, height, body type, gender, everything down to the clothing they typically wore in life, or in modern cases, the clothing they were wearing upon death. This is even the case for the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which shows deceased people in the afterlife appearing as they did exactly in life. The Scots word for ghost is wraith, and was used more figuratively to speak about omens or aquatic spirits. J.R.R. Tolkien popularized the use of wraith with his ring wraith creatures in Lord of the Rings, so if you're ever wondering where the colloquially accepted visage of a wraith comes from, now you know. Bhutta is a Hindi ghost, and contributes greatly to the modern idea of the unfinished business trope. Though modern interpretations of Bhutta vary across regions and communities, these are usually restless spirits that died suddenly and left something undone. They're unable to rest. The Hindu deity Shiva is known as the god of ghosts. He is often called Bhuttapati, the lord of the spirits, and is known to accept the unaccepted. Strange and unusual, forgotten, rejected, or restless spirits come to Lord Shiva for guidance, compassion, or shelter. In a metaphorical sense, ghosts were discussed by both Nietzsche and Jung in the way people interact with society. Nietzsche, ever the cynical pessimist, saw people as predictable, socially obedient, and readable to the point of boredom. Because of his repulsion of this, he told people to cultivate a social distance for oneself. Be hard to pin down. Don't let other people know the real you. Control how when you appear. When he said, "One reaches out for us but gets no hold," he was framing it as a self-mastery and selective presence. This meant ghosting was a strength. You were not easily influenced or owned, nor did you waste time on being performative. Ostensibly, it should mean you have the ultimate power by controlling access to yourself, and I get that. There's nothing wrong with setting up boundaries, but being too obtuse can have its own problems, and that's where he clashed with Jung. Jung saw Nietzsche's framework of ghosting as a sort of social disassociation, a sort of emotional avoidance that was counter to his own philosophy of integration, relationships, and mutual recognition. Jung claimed that to become ghost-like meant that you weren't engaging your persona properly. Instead, you were avoiding confrontation with your shadow. This led to a detachment from real human connection and could end in alienation, fragmentation of the self, and an inability to individuate properly. You weren't being socially intangible, you failed to fully exist in relation to others. So when Nietzsche says, "You cannot grasp me because I'm above your expectations," the Jungian philosophy interprets that as, "You cannot grasp me because I am not fully here." And the difference here is nihilism. And in that regard, Beetlejuice and Adam are the worst possible outcome of Nietzsche's ghost ideal. They refuse to fit into social norms and operate outside of morality. Adam's stick it to the man philosophy, along with his refusal to hold himself to the same standard of righteousness he edicts onto everyone else, is exactly the same kind of toxic nihilism as Beetlejuice being refused by both the land of the living and the land of the dead, sealed away because his misdeeds as a bio-exorcist gone rogue. Beetlejuice weaponizes unpredictability while Adam uses it as a scapegoat. Fuck you, I do what I want. But also, they are the absolute Jungian nightmare. Pure fragmentation, no integration, no balance, pure impulsiveness. Adam is always wearing his mask. He maintains an air of impersonality in every aspect of his existence. It isn't until his mask is forcibly destroyed at the end of Season 1 in Has-Been that we see the man underneath, and he is angry, conceited, irrational. All the things that also apply to Beetlejuice. That guy, he's like a walking Jungian shadow with a mold problem. Nietzsche saw the social ghost as a deliberate act of self-sovereignty, while Jung saw it as a symptom of psychic disintegration. And me, well, I don't really know. Part of me sees the validity in having a sort of mask to use as a shield. Oscar Wilde says, "A man is least himself when he speaks in his own person. Give him a mask, and he will show you the truth." But it's also bad to cut yourself off and maintain a sort of false ghost around people who actually care. There's safety in anonymity, even if you're anonymous in public, hidden in plain sight. Leashe wak un mutlak bal kulun munkin. If you understood that, we can be friends. Ghosts, as we define them broadly in Tales of Atonement universe, are psychic manifestations of a person's spirit. The stronger a person's psi abilities, the stronger their potential ghost becomes, with only the strongest psychics being capable of creating a specter that can manifest physically and influence the physical realm. It's important to remember that in these cases, all ghosts can still be reintegrated with their physical body if such a thing still exists and is in good enough condition to maintain life. This means that as soon as decomp starts, the ghost is stuck. It's also important as a ghost in Atonement to never go to sleep in a place where you've manifested. As far as I know, ghosts don't really get tired, but the act of sleeping or laying down to rest can be calming for a restless spirit, especially if they're in a place where their loved ones are still present. However, if you go to sleep as a ghost inside a house, a building, a cave, or anywhere, you get trapped, and now you can only manifest in that place. This is especially tragic for those who die in their sleep because they wake up dead. Your average ghost doesn't know they're dead until they interact with a psychopomp. Typically, psychopomps are the only people who can even see ghosts unless you've been specially trained for the task. Certain devices can detect the presence of ghosts, but only psychopomps can interact with them on a physical level. If you've watched any of the dozen Ghost Hunter channels on YouTube, you probably already know what I'm talking about, or if you've at least played Phasmophobia. In my own experience, many of these objects can work as intended, however, a lot of the time the readings are misinterpreted by humans that are not actually sensitive or magically inclined. Ouija boards absolutely do not work. The original Ouija was created in 1890 and was trademarked by Parker Brothers, a board game company. The word itself comes from the phrase that was supposedly spelled out on the board and translated by a spiritualist named Helen Peters Nosworthy. She apparently said the word meant good luck, which sounds perfectly ominous on its own, but the overall practice of planchet writing comes from an older Chinese practice called Fuji. Now, here's how you know the Ouija board is an invention of total fiction. In her later years, Noseworthy's collection of Confederate Army buttons, a family heirloom, went missing. She asked the board, and it implicated one of the family members. Noseworthy immediately flipped, disavowed the use of the Ouija, and claimed the board was lying. Totally believable. But instead of listening to the words of a white woman appropriating Chinese culture for the benefit of her own slave-owning family, if you want to use actual planchet writing to communicate with spirits, the Chinese method is more reliable and older, having been used since at least the 12th century CE. Planchet writing uses a psychological effect called ideomotor response, in which a person subconsciously moves an object without realizing it. Some spirits are able to affect a person psychologically and induct an IRM in order to communicate if they are unable to manifest physically. Other methods of technological communication are also effective. EVP, temperature readers, compasses, these sorts of devices utilize the magic behind spirit, which focuses on human-made technology, technomancy in a sense. In our universe, there are 3 very common types of ghosts, and how they represent is determined by a few factors: personal belief, spiritual knowledge, and condition of death. A personal belief in ghosts can inspire the mind to create a spirit where once was a person. That is, the more people believe in ghosts, the more likely they are to become one. Spiritual knowledge pertains to things like religion. Certain religious or spiritual practices can have an effect on what happens to a spirit after death, including spectralization, reincarnation, or ultimate demise, in which a person's consciousness simply stops existing and there is nothing but blackness. The condition of one's death can also affect what happens to them after. For instance, someone who dies with business left undone, sure, but also a sudden violent death versus a sudden peaceful death can still have a different outcome. The top 3 common ghosts are interactive and intelligent ghosts, which are a direct spectral copy of a living person, how they appeared, thought, acted, and believed in life. A person with a strong psychic presence, a belief in ghosts, and a deep spiritual conviction is most likely to become an intelligent ghost in life unless their spiritual conviction sends them to a specific afterlife zone such as Purgatory, Helheim, or Tirnanolk. Residual ghosts may look and act like a living person, but are usually completely incorporeal. These are ghosts that hang on to an area and follow a set pattern. They may show up as a cold spot, a disembodied voice, or a faint outline, but they never interact with the living and cannot be communicated with in any way. Spectral ghosts are most often from people with a strong psychic manifestation but a weak spiritual conviction or disbelief in ghosts. Vengeful spirits are rare, but real. Ghosts like the Poltergeist, Banshee, Onryo, Pisacha, or La Llorona are classic vengeful spirits known for being able to affect the physical world, and might even be able to enact a spectral violence onto the living people, either specific targets or humanity in general. A person with a strong psychic connection or deep spiritual conviction who dies violently or unjustly will most likely become a vengeful spirit and take on a name befitting the cultural relevance they understood in life. Many of the ghosts you can think of fit into one of these 3 basic categories. Beetlejuice himself would classify as a vengeful spirit because he's able to manifest and do violence upon the living. In the second movie, Beetlejuice, it was confirmed that he was poisoned by his ex-wife during the Black Plague. His ex-wife Dolores was apparently the leader of a cult who married him intending to sacrifice him. She poisoned his wine, and as the poison took full effect, Beetle proceeded to chop her to bits with an axe. Early drafts of the 1988 film suggested a different demise, that he had attempted to hang himself over the loss of a woman who rejected him. This was eventually omitted from the final film, making the poisoning death Beetle's official canon.
Lived through the Black Plague, and I had a pretty good time during that.
How the hell did you get out again? God damn it. Alright, I'm about at my time limit, so what can I get into here? You guys still want a fanfic for this? Why not? Here we go. This will probably be the most cringe thing ever, but, after dying at the hands of the cast of the Hazbin Hotel, Adam found himself in purgatory rather than in heaven or hell. He'd already been to heaven, and he was killed by an angelic weapon, so he should have just been dead, right? Well, not with the power of nepotism and crackpot fan theories. Because souls exist in the liminal space outside of time, Adam's soul was transported back in time to the exact moment he died, where he was then forced to remain as a ghost while helping guide restless spirits through the afterlife. The name Beetlejuice became common, which is why it is known in so many cultures and associated with death, warlike power, and resurrection. It also explains how Beetlejuice could have witnessed the Black Plague and attended Juilliard. Eventually, after a couple thousand years of helping others find redemption and having none himself, he just sort of snapped, said fuck heaven, fuck hell, and decided to wreak havoc on the living as a ghostly apparition of toxicity and chaos. Borrowing heavily from the demon that killed him, the hellish overlord named Nifty, he became obsessed with bugs and began calling himself Beetlejuice rather than Beetlejuice, until he was eventually thwarted by Lydia Dietz and the Maitlands. In this picture, he's serving as a psychopomp for Delia as an omen for her demise during the second Beetlejuice movie. Plus, we know that both Beetle and Adam like using an axe. Well, now I'm going to throw this back to you. Don't expect many crossovers that don't directly intersect with Tales of Atonement. I want you to do some comparative mythology as long as the degrees of separation lead us right back here where all roads lead, to Atonement. Like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments who your favorite fictional phantom is. Mine? Sadako Yamamura. She's literally the strongest, most deadly ghost in existence, and it's not even close. I want to thank every one of you once again this week for coming to these ramblings of an anxiety-ridden pyromancer.
And her dragon best friend. We're a small team just doing our best to bring our stories we've loved for decades and hope they're the kind you like too.
With a side info dump of psychology, lore, history, and social awareness.
If this is your first video, we hope you'll stay for another one. And maybe you could consider becoming a subscriber. We'd love to see you again.
Our subscribers can move mountains for a channel like this. The engagement we get just keeps growing each week. You guys are getting the word out and people are listening.
And we really can't express how grateful we are to see our passion project take off. 20 years of love and dedication are here laid bare. Help as much as you care to, but at least watch and talk with us.
Of course, we can't close out a video without giving a shout out to our patrons. Emily Masternardi,
Heinrich 28,
Pammy Poo,
JC Moreland,
Shadow Fox,
Charles Tam,
Arya Gamari,
Lundair Lumen. But also don't forget our channel members, Moose Now,
Jack McLeod,
Plebe 64 Potato,
Lundair Lumen,
7 Stars Sanctuary.
and Chained Furry, Many a Mickle Maximuckle.
See you next week.